try again. I'm gonna start allowing people in. And here's the YouTube stream if needed. I'm not sure if it would be. Hi, everyone. We're gonna start in a couple minutes just to give time to everyone to join in. Maybe we can begin with the introduction, just to save some time. I'm going to start recording, by the way. So, hi everyone. Thanks so much for joining today. We're very excited for this event. We'll be screening this fantastic film by the artists duo Vermeer and Hermans, who are here today also. And we're going to follow up with a discussion between Bassam El-Baruni and the artists. I'm just going to give a very brief introduction of Weird Economies for those of you who haven't been joining our public events yet. So we are an online project, and basically we're kind of a site for discussions around unorthodox and radical economic practices in a post-disciplinary space. And we're also managing a sort of archiving and programming space and a knowledge infrastructure around these discussions. And we have a series of programs, reading groups that you can follow on our website, and you can subscribe to our newsletter at the bottom of the homepage if you go to the website weirdeconomies.com. So about today's event, maybe I first introduce the film before the artist and Bassam. So the film is a modest proposal in a black box made in 2018. So in the film, the artists Vermeer and Hermans, who are also the film's protagonists, discuss a new financial model with a lawyer. Their dialogue, witnessed by the lawyer's assistant, focuses on the question if financialization can be repurposed towards generating a more equitable arts ecology. Considering the financialization of public art collections, museum real estate, and symbolic capital or goodwill, the financial model should benefit not only investors and art institutions, but also its stakeholders, the creators of the art assets value, the artists, and art workers. Vermeer and Hermans are an artist duo defining their own house as an artwork in 2006, became the basis for a long-term artistic practice together. The house as artwork is a framing device to open up a meta perspective on their own work, the art world, and daily life in general. Their practice investigates the dynamics between economy, law and governing, deploying the arts and the socioeconomic conditions of artists as their preferred case studies. Considering the art world as a microcosmos for the dynamics that play out in wider society, they look into the possibilities for a more equitable distribution of values produced. And Bassam El-Baruni, who's also one of the board members of Weird Economies, is an assistant professor in curating at the Schools of Art, Design, and Architecture at Aalto University, Finland. Formerly, he has lectured at the Dutch Art Institute, Artes University of the Arts, Arnhem, and was artistic director of the now folded nonprofit art space, ACAF, Alexandria Contemporary Arts Forum in Alexandria, Egypt, from 2005 to 2012. His current research engages with financialization in relation to artistic practices, artist engagement with infrastructure of futures and histories, and new forms of artist-led activism. So on that note, just to keep this part short, we would like to show the film first before getting into the discussion. And I'm gonna share the link of the film on our website, actually. So the film is playing on the events page on our website. So in case your internet is slow, you can just watch the film on your own. It's about 28 minutes, and come back here in 30 minutes, but we're going to pray it from this screen too. So either way you prefer. I'm going to start sharing my screen.
A modest proposal in a black box looks at the riches in society that take the form of public assets like priceless art collections and exquisite museum buildings. A large proportion of this wealth is tied up in the bricks and mortar of museum real estate and in the artworks themselves. When one cannot or does not want to sell the art, a priceless commodity, or the museum, then these remain so-called frozen assets. Together with a team of experts, Vermeer and Heeremans are developing a financial model that can assist museum administrators in generating an income flow, a true source of liquidity stemming from their public collections or museum real estate. A modest proposal can make streams of economic and social wealth produced by exchange flow back to their origins, the artists and art workers, to create more equitable futures in which art can flourish as an ecology of practices. The artists and their team inspire confidence with their proven track record in the field of art and finance. They are best known for the development of Art House Index, an experimental financial index that measures the economic and symbolic value of their own loft apartment, which in their practice they define as an artwork. At the same time, the index is a marker for the cultural capital that the artist duo Vermeer and Heeremans, as public persona, continually accrue.
A modest proposals portfolio will contain museum buildings and also art collections, assets that are carefully accumulated in partnership with different art institutions worldwide. None of these public assets have to be sold. Only a percentage of their property equity will be offered to investors.
Capital growth and rental income on museum collections and real estate will benefit investors to the extent of equity they bought. Museums, on the other hand, they will have access to new capital streams to the extent of the percentage of equity they sold. In that way, this new liquid money will make it possible for museums to buy new artworks or build new extensions to the museum, or actually even remunerate artists in their programs. Even art institutions without these physical assets, they may also want to join the Modest Proposal portfolio. Their goodwill, also a form of equity, will be taken into account and will be measured by real-time data analysis based on their credits, the credits they accumulate, and these are based on their good practices. An automated dividend will be flowing from the Modest Proposal exchange to the original stakeholders in this cycle of wealth generation, the artists and art workers, and whereupon this cycle can start all over again, so initiating a new value cycle.
Yeah, so what's the whole idea of using the pump house, and where did the original idea come from?
Well, a Modest Proposal will be first introduced in Pump House Gallery. So we hope that at the same time they will be the ones that implement a Modest Proposal first, because it's of course a location within London that has enormous potential. So that's also something that could be very beneficial for the project, talking about valuing the equity, pumping it up, and then seeing to it that it's also beneficial for larger community of artists.
It has to do also with the development of the power station, of course. You see all the grey zones being like whole renovation, whole real estate development projects there going on. And since Pump House does not have a collection, we focus on the real estate of the gallery. Try to leverage that.
Yeah, so I guess the Pump House Gallery is both a kind of a forum for this project and a protagonist of the project, but also a potential beneficiary at the same time. So
well, they're part of this cycle of value creation and capitalization on that value, which we want to suggest in the Modest Proposal, basically. That's the whole scheme that we try to set up.
Right. So the whole
you contribute and then you receive, contribute, receive, and it becomes a cycle.
that the power station itself is really kind of the center point and the centerpiece of a redevelopment project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and yeah, in the past there were numerous plans for redevelopment already, but it all fell through. But since 2012, there is this Malaysian consortium that bought it, I think, for 400 million
£500 million, and
yeah.
then they sold it again in January of this year. And then there was a Malaysian sovereign wealth fund and a pension fund with Malaysian government backing that bought it for 1.6 billion. It's like the most expensive real estate deal in the UK ever.
Mm-hmm.
So what kind of form is the current project going to take then? I mean, how are they going to redevelop the site?
Well, basically this will be a shopping mall, Apple's headquarters. Here's like developments already put in place. It will be Frank Gehry's apartments. Foster and Partner will be here, I think. And that would connect to 2 new subway stations to connect it to the city on the other side of the Thames. Very much in parallel, referring to the Victorian
Right, with what
era
went before.
with the Chelsea Bridge. Basically.
And that was also an improvement of accessibility.
Yeah.
So that was connected to the opening of the park to create
Create bigger land value,
Yeah.
basically.
And that's also the connection to, of course, the Pump House Gallery, which is at this moment the centerpiece of a modest proposal, because that's the case study a modest proposal is now looking into the value creation around Pump House Gallery, and with all this new real estate coming in, for sure the values are going to rise substantially.
Right, so this is the Pump House Gallery located just to the
So
west.
it's the orange triangle.
The
We
little
hope to
dot in
use
the
it
park.
to capture some of those rising values through financialization of that real estate. It's only a modest piece of real estate in comparison, of course, but, well,
We try to create a balance there. So this we designed to communicate the situation around Pump House Gallery and how we could leverage all the values that are situated
You mean-
already around it.
pump up
Pump up, yeah.
the value.
Pump up the values.
Yeah.
So
Restore Pump House to its original design, basically.
yeah, right.
I think it's like trying to see what we as artists or the Pump House Gallery curator can do to pump up their assets. So we looked into existing city indices to see how we
How they
could
could be
pump up
mobilized.
the equity value of Pump House Gallery. So for example, we looked into the Global Power City Index, the Alpha Cities Index, the Foreign Direct Investment Confidence Index. So we looked in these indexes, and then we came up with the measurements that they use to value the different cities. So these criteria are livability, so that's the first pump. So here we have all our pumps: livability, economy, accessibility, cultural interaction, and art housing.
Yeah, and then try to see that as communicating vessels, to see if we can connect these criteria to close the investment gap that we observe.
Yeah, the Foreign Direct Investment Index ranks London as the most attractive investment opportunity. And the Pump House Gallery could take advantage of these sources of wealth by developing its own pitch book to attract foreign direct investment and cementing a relationship with the foreign investment community and its surplus capital. Artists and art institutions have really got to be developing initiatives for enhancing their assets and exploiting them. You really have to be sweating those assets.
Yeah, and if you talk about this enhancing assets, we can relate that to the Pump House Gallery, because it's bordering opportunity area. It's a huge regeneration zone, and that has a vision for a lot of new homes, 25,000 jobs. And of course also cultural quarters and green spaces. This area also boasts, of course, the Battersea Power Station as its most significant real estate development, and also the tall building strategy, hence the name that is already in place, Mini Manhattan and Dubai on Thames. And for sure that this will generate a huge influx of tourists and architecture and art lovers. Pump House Gallery could really ride this wave of increased attention, I think.
The Pump House Gallery there really has an advantage, of course, by being already located within this so-called opportunity area. Because, I mean, if you think about what the meaning of the opportunity area is, it really turns the idea of equity on its head, because equity is usually the creation of additional value, which is then sellable in all kinds of markets, and then futures and derivatives as well. I mean, the idea of the opportunity area really is a kind of a temporal construction where you predict the addition of future equity, and then try and fill in the gap by guaranteeing what's going to happen in the future and creating the infrastructure which will bring that prosperity to that area. I can see how that's really going to work in this case, because obviously that's going to attract the relevant foreign direct investment to generate that future wealth based on that infrastructure. I guess that's only really going to happen in terms of the development of that wealth itself, once the right people move in and the right businesses move in and they start spending money and living and working and consuming in the right way to make this a kind of a viable thing. I guess to develop the right kind of trust and confidence within the foreign direct investment community, what's happened is that the local and national authorities have actually guaranteed and underwritten the envisaged tax receipts for the next 25 years from the wealth which is envisaged within that area. So you can really see that this project is built on the projected wealth of the future.
According to Alpha City Index, London is most attractive to ultra-high net worth individuals to invest in real estate as a safe deposit box and for its level of cultural interaction. These ultra-high net worth individuals will soon be the Pump House Gallery's very desirable neighbors. The Global Power City Index ranks London first for cultural interaction. It also mentions 5 global actors who lead the urban activities in their cities: manager, researcher, artist, visitor, and resident. The artist community is therefore to be taken into account by a city if it wants to obtain the much desired global power. Paris, number 1, Berlin, number 2, and London, number 3, are the top 3 ranked cities by artists on criteria such as cultural stimulation, accumulation of artists and art markets, environment for creative activities, and ease of living. Vermeer and Heremans introduce an additional Pump E, a reciprocal accumulation of symbolic value between the Pump House Gallery and Art House Index through the first public exhibition of a modest proposal in a black box. Potentially, this will offer a sustainable outcome for the artists themselves and a more equitable future for the art community if the Pump House Gallery decides to be part of a modest proposals portfolio. Art House Index will at the same time measure accumulated economic values, like the swelling tide of the global real estate markets and confidence in the art market, all by taking the artist's art house as a framing device. Let's see if the investment gap of Pump House Gallery can be closed. I shall run a viability appraisal algorithm performing predictive calculations on probable capital flows in the different pumps. The Pump House Gallery is seemingly becoming more than liquid. Look at that. It even starts to levitate.
Thank you very much. I hand it to Bassam and yourself.
Thank you, Bahar. Can we start by looking at the context for the video and the proposal, which is the Battersea Park regeneration project that's mentioned in the video, and the Pump House Gallery's kind of location within the vicinity of this regeneration project. It's mentioned in the video that the idea is to, through the proposal, enhance the assets of the Pump House Gallery. I think one point we could start with is kind of like looking at the differences between your plan for enhancing the assets of the Pump House Gallery, and the difference between that and between the kind of various conversations, approaches that we're accustomed to within the arts sector around the role of regeneration and or urban regeneration and gentrification. What would you say are the key differences?
Thank you for a very long question, Bassam. First, we wanted to say thank you for the invitation because we didn't have a chance. So we're very happy to be here, and thanks for this conversation. And regarding your question, yes, the whole scheme was developed, the modest proposal, so to speak, was already there in its concept form. And then we were invited to London to this small gallery space in the middle of Battersea Park. And we were very excited that it was there because London is really the city of high finance. And that area is very special and specific because it has a so-called opportunity area in space at that moment. It's still going on. It's a very long duration opportunity area. What we found exciting at that point was because we were looking into a redistribution of value within the financial proposal that you saw in the film, but the idea was to distribute it to the community of artists. And then later in a symposium, we questioned our own proposal because it's a bit of a strange idea that you distribute money or values from public goods just to a small group of people, of artists. Normally, it's like a parliament deciding like, okay, when you have some tax from people, you distribute it in this and this and this way. It's not one person deciding, and it's not going to a small group. But then when we started to look into this area, we saw in this opportunity zone that this was what they were doing in London. So they extracted already tax that was going to be there in the future. And using these small increments in tax, they would win when there were new businesses, new real estate, and so on. And these taxes were going to benefit the foreign investors immediately, and they got a guarantee to their income, to these surplus values. And no politician could do anything about it. If you didn't agree with this, it would be like that for 20 more years. So they really extracted the future, you can already say. And of course, this was also something that added to the gentrification of this area, of course. So they added arts, a whole artist zone and cultural events, and then the gallery was there. So yeah, it was already a zone of pumping up values and extraction. So it was excellent to have the modest proposal in there as a contrast. Yeah. Do you want to add something?
It was London's poorest area, actually, in the 19th century. It was one of the poorest areas in London, and it was still very poor. The pump house, the power station had been empty for quite a while, really long time. And now, after this regeneration, it would become one of the wealthiest areas. It's actually a safety deposit box for foreign capital to be invested in real estate. You could see also in terms of what kind of apartments were built there. So it's Frank Gehry, Foster and Partners. It's all, yeah, kind of problematic in a way. It's really conceived as an investment scheme. There's nothing to do with social housing. Was actually cut because of a certain crisis. There was no real social housing, it was affordable housing. But affordable housing went up and down. The number of affordable houses went up and down with a percentage of potential profit. So of course, this gentrification scheme usually has some artists that kind of have the role of an extra, you could say, to kind of highlight or beautify the whole situation. And I think the invitation to us was more a question like, could you formulate a critical perspective on that? And that's basically what we did. And of course, there's one thing when an institution says, can you formulate a critical perspective? And when you really do that, you get into trouble, of course. So that's what happened. It was actually never the idea to make a film. It was kind of, yeah, well, I must say, watching yourself play again in this film. I'm not really playing, just being yourself, basically. But the idea was to propose this financial model to the board of directors of the Pump House Gallery. But management blocked that. So then they found a new possibility to do that, which was a kind of monthly meeting of programmers in the area, theaters, galleries, you know, people that are concerned with culture in the area. There was a positive feedback that it was going to happen, but in the end it didn't happen. So what happened in the end was that us were pitching the modest proposal in our kitchen for a friend lawyer. And as we mentioned that the house we conceive as an artwork, although it's the virtual version of the house, we had the liberty of replanning our apartment, which is Brussels,
to the Battersea area. That's why you see all these views, and that's how we solved actually an unsolvable situation. Because there was no way we were going to drop that project after a year preparation. So that was kind of tight. But in the end, we were really happy with the proposal, because it allowed us to come from a very, let's say, general idea, how to financialize public art collections, public infrastructures, and goodwill. That's a kind of general idea, but when you start thinking about a concrete situation, and that's what the project allows you to do, you really have to invest yourself in a concrete situation. You kind of end up with different insights. And the nice thing about the project, and I'll keep it at that, was that because we were in such a almost antagonistic situation, except with the curator, we decided not to go head on and speak about the Battersea Power Station development. We were actually looking into the 19th century, the Victorian era. And in mid-19th century, Battersea Park was created. And that in itself was a speculative moment par excellence, because at the time it was an agricultural zone where poor people grew some vegetables for the markets in London. And the moment that local governments started disowning these lands, people started constructing fake houses on the lands in order to raise the price for disappropriation. And we found all kinds of things, trials in archives and stuff. So that was the first time that we did basically a documentary exhibition on a 19th century development of a park. But whomever would visit the show and would see the current situation could immediately draw a parallel between the 19th century and today, basically.
Hyper speculation.
Hyper speculation, although of course in a different scale, but it seems to be part of us. You know, it was regular people speculating on a personal private profit. Actually, the area had a commons. A commons was was common land, basically part of it, and they sold it. They decided to sell it, and they built a community center with the money that they obtained for that, which unfortunately was torn down in the 70s. But that's as a kind of situation how the project kind of responded to the context in which it was presented.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the Art House Index, the project that I think you also mentioned is a key framing device in a modest proposal?
The Art House Index is a work older than a modest proposal. It's one of the devices, so to speak, that we developed because we were interested from the beginning in the world of finance and from a critical point of view, and also trying to talk to a lot of people that were working in finance, like asset managers, bankers, and because we were fascinated by how they can abstract things and make then a stream of money flowing from this. And as artists, also you're interested in how is this abstraction process possible. It's very artistic and very conceptual in a way what these people are doing. As a kind of tryout, we told them we want to financialize our own house. It's just one house. And then we went through discussions with them, and in the end we came up with that's maybe a way to start financializing, because it didn't generate any income stream whatsoever yet. But the index is basically a measuring tool that measures like the minute per minute, so to speak, the value of the house, not literally this house, because you can't ask anyone to come in every minute to look and see what the value might be. So we were looking on internet to find values of Belgian real estate, but also European or worldwide real estate, and you can find data about these values. We looked into people looking at our website at the videos, like a kind of attention value. So it's a mix of different values: a real estate, attention value, and artistic value. We don't have any sales values because we don't really sell art, but we were looking into different data which we could use to generate a living index, so to speak, that would measure some kind of symbolic value of the art house, the house that is an artwork at the same time.
It's not a price. It's not a price index. It's a marker index. So we calculated a number, as Kathleen said, a number of parameters. Calculate a number every 10 seconds. And has been doing so since 2015. We can send you a link, Bahar, so you can share it if you want. So you can consult this index, and every 10 seconds it's recalculating. And it's really fascinating to see how this index, in a way, is behaving fairly like a mirror. If you check out what's going on in financial world, it has its ups and downs. It's really, and in that sense, it is was really astonishing to work with one asset manager who was actually a person who was designing all sorts of indices for as a wealth manager for people that had too much money and they wanted to find out what to do with their money. And so that's why he created all these indices. He was a professor in statistics. So it was really fascinating. And starting from an Excel sheet, we came up with what we wanted from that model. And then we had the person design the actual calculation online. Mm-hmm. Because
it also started from the idea of the house, because we were also interested in this oikonomos, the idea of the house as the generator of economy. Like that was how it was, the word of economy had a beginning, like the Greek word from managing just the household. And then later it became more political economy. Mm. So that's also why we started from the house and generating these indexes on the ups and downs of the symbolic value.
It's not so far-fetched as it would seem, because today art indices are mainly based on second market information, like the auction house information. Actually, the first indices were real estate indices. So that's where the model was developed in the, I think, 60s. And when May Moses, I think, started thinking about this, that's the first art index. It's totally based on real estate indices. So it's a completely same model. So that's why we thought, okay, having this idea, a house as an artwork, it seems to be more interesting rather than going for a fund, which is another way of financializing art. We would go for a kind of measuring tool, an index. And actually we used the index to, it was the period that we were looking into value creation in art, and we made a film on that, how to use this, what this index would be actually in a market environment. And at the same time, the way we screen this film live for an audience is actually being edited live by the performance of the index. So it kind of brings things together. It's kind of what you see is how it is made, and why you see it, it's changing, because somewhere in the world, financial models are defining what's happening there, and they are actually choosing different images while you're looking at it. It sounds complex, but it's really an easy trigger mechanism that we came up with. And so yeah, that's.
So it serves many purposes,
Exactly.
this index.
I think that leads me to another kind of conversation around, maybe a bit more abstract conversation around how you see the relationship in your work between your work in general, and this specific work also, between speculation and kind of realism. How would you kind of situate that kind of relationship in your work?
Yeah, I think as an artist, we think humor is very important. It's not that we make a lot of jokes, but we think there is some kind of undertone in the work. Like if you want to balance out the financial completely inequality with a small gallery in comparison to this big development, that kind of dark humor, you could say, we find important. And at the same time, working as an artist, you're not limited, only limited by your imagination, basically. And you can actually play around with all of these funny instruments and funny ideas that are out there in the world. The annoying thing for us is that while playing around, we also find it important to really understand these things. So we do a lot of research to really go into stuff and understand what's going on. And from that understanding, try to find try to break a corner, or, kind of disrupt something or infiltrate, whatever you want to call it, do something with it. That's one aspect. On the other hand, it is also our little source of inspiration to think about what we could do in reality. In reality, you are very much confined by what's going on around you. So that's what we call operational realism kind of activities. And for that, we co-founded with a number of other artists a platform for artistic research called Jubilee. And that platform, of course, allows us to be active in policy levels on what is cultural policy in our country, in Flanders, I should say, because our country is separated into cultural hemispheres. What is the statute of the artist? How is he being paid? What's an artist contract? So we do all kinds of, let's say, collective projects with Jubilee, apart from the individual projects that are supported by the platform. And that allows us to dig into these real scenarios and real problems.
No, and yeah, the idea is what Ronnie said, that the speculative aspect can teach us something, because you can go kind of wild in your imagination. And then we try to learn from all these aspects and this research for real world situations.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you just, I think this is might be another one of those longer questions. You just mentioned this notion of infiltration, Ronnie, and I was kind of like wondering when you were talking about it, how that kind of relates to the activation of legal frameworks or contractual forms, as kind of evidenced in the work. But I think there's also another question, in the sense that this work and then Art House Index, and there's a focus on assets, the activation of assets, legal frameworks, and contractual forms that are somehow embedded in assets that have kind of like real physical presence, or you know, a real estate, so to speak, real land. And of course, one can't help these days kind of think about virtual assets, and the you know, the whole questions that are kind of unfolding from the rise of non-fungible tokens, etc. And how do you see the kind of the mode of operation that you just identified as operational realism in relationship to this kind of unfolding territory? Can we speculate a little bit about that? And I mean, can you project into this future unstable ground, so to speak, for many of us who are still kind of feeling their way through this territory?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. It's a bit of feeling through the territory. Yeah, when we yeah, I think in some way when we talk about Arthouse Index and so on, it's already some time ago we made this work, but in a way it kind of prefigures the whole idea of this virtual asset making, and especially like the financialization of the self, because this was for us kind of critical dialogue about, okay, yeah, if you use your human capital and you try to leverage your risks and so on, this kind of, and you financialize all your personal assets, that comes very close to what is happening today, because the technology has made that possible. And before that, of course, you have finance, and we had to talk to these asset managers and bankers. And if you, in a way, would ask, okay, can you make this model, for example, a modest proposal or any other financialization scheme, they would say, okay, we can make a special purpose vehicle. And you have to, it's a very complex way that you have to pass through big institutions. So in a way, we are interested in the emancipatory proposal of these blockchains and NFTs. At least that's what they sometimes proclaim to be. But at the moment, we are very interested in looking deeper into that, if that is actually the case. And yeah, the speculative framework around it, I think the work already that we did with a modest proposal might prefigure in a way already like what the direction is, but we really need to find out more and be critical, like what is this in fact, because we were reading up on a text talking about public goods and the museum starting to sell NFTs, making NFT collections of the public goods that are in their possession. And many people are wondering, like, are they not too quick to do that? Because do they know exactly what these NFTs are? And the question is raised, like in the 30s, for example, there were many small institutions or people that were selling away their rights, TV rights. And Walt Disney famously or infamously refused to do that. But of course, afterwards, he's the one that didn't sign away his rights. So what is happening with these NFTs in the museum? So that's a big question, I think. If people are not too quick to think it's all emancipatory and so on. So yeah, there are many questions that we want to look into, what they claim and what are the possibilities and what are the pitfalls.
And also, I think one of our concerns, and also sprouting from how we identify position of Jubilee as an organization, is thinking about redistribution of value or alternative distribution of value. And one of the things that we see in the NFT market, I should say, is a one-on-one relation, but it's still private accumulation. And it, per se, the technology allows for a much wider redistribution. When I look now at the film and models proposal, I can imagine, okay, you could do a market on NFTs. It seems to be really easy to do so, or at least it's accessible to do so, but it could also be done in a way that it is about redistributing values that are created in the market per se and not for one work per se. Because now it's still the same. The outcome is the same. You have the haves and the have-nots. So when you're commercially successful, you will be more commercially successful in an NFT market. But there's no way that you can escape this commercial success when you apply the model as it is now. And I think
on the attention value success, I would say.
It just amplifies what's already there. And I think this technology allows for other things as well, but they have hardly been kind of worked on, or at least not to our understanding. But as Kathleen said, it's the beginning of our exploration of this new environment, which has a technical aspect, which we don't want to focus on too much. We'd rather focus on the legal and economic underlying parameters that play out in this model and are not very visible, or that are claimed to be different. And that's something that we hope to understand better in the future and see what we can do with it. But not very clear.
We're very interested in the idea of the common good. And if in this text I mentioned, they also say, like, can museums just sell away a common good or a public good as a private property? And some people are talking about, okay, can we serve our community, our visitors to the museum? Can we perhaps fund with this extra money community projects around the museum? So there might be interesting possibilities, but of course we also have to see that it's not hijacked too quickly by big capital or the big whales that they always seem to talk about. But there are possibilities, and we're trying to research these elements. So it's still in a speculative phase.
Very speculative.
I think maybe from there we can just find out about your current projects. I know that there's a current project that you're working on in the city of Spa in Belgium, and it has to do with the common resource of water. Of course, Spa is famous for its water resources. And can you tell us a little bit about the projects, its aims and mission, so to speak?
So it's a very different in its form, I would say, because during Corona we decided to go out instead of outside with public, instead of sitting inside looking at our computers too much. So it's a project that uses walking as a methodology together with the public. But the idea coming from the other projects is basically continuing, and that's the idea of the distribution of value. And in Spa, we are looking at that in more from the point of view of law, I would say, than from finance or financialization. But that's the project about. And of course, we look at water sources as a common good, and look into that as kind of examples or case studies for how we can look at art. Can art making or participating in art be a kind of common good as well? How can it be done? And how can the values generated, symbolic and financial values, be distributed, mutualized in a bigger community? so that it becomes a more sustainable community. So that was the starting point of the walking project.
And it's a bit of a similar situation as in London. It's not so tense. So we are supported by Museum for Heritage, local Museum for Heritage, but it became really it's clear that in Spa, everything which has to do with water is very sensitive because it's a private company having monopoly on exploitation, and some people are in favor, others are really against, and they pay part of the communal budget as a kind of royalty. So when
There's a community that owns the sources, but the private company, a holding company, has the license to exploit it.
So we took a similar approach as in London, rather than as outsiders going in a little village, or what has become a little village, or a little city, I should say. Rather than mingling directly with property relation on water and taking an activist turn, we decided to take a historical approach, specifically because the museum, the water in Spa has been exploited for 4 centuries already. And there's an amazing archive, documents as well as artifacts. So we chose to focus on the 19th century and kind of reading up on Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, father of anarchism. And the amazing thing that happened in Spa was that in one of the chateaus, one of the castle villas, there was a person who lived there called Ernest Gambart. Nobody knows Ernest Gambart, of course. But Ernest Gambart was an art dealer in mid-19th century London. And he basically invented what we call an art gallery. So that was amazing when we found out that person had a villa in Spa. So we had an approach, water and art. We could connect those. And of course, the art dealer was monopolizing values of his artist, and Proudhon was mutualizing values of whatever.
Natural resources, land.
So that's the comparison that we make, and we try to understand through the case study, because in Spa there is a redistribution of value. The company pays royalties to the city. Well, we don't see in art. Art market is winner take all. There's no redistribution. You can say, yeah, there's taxes and then there's subsidies of the government, but we're speaking here of private companies that actually pay. And in our country, that is hardly the case, I would say. So in that sense, we kind of have we're actually preparing a kind of symposium on this, and we still need to clarify what is the exact focus. So that's not really finished yet, but we did a number of walks in September last year. That was really nice. And we'll do some more in September, in springtime, I mean, to really try to understand, try to write about it in a way that is really concise and very precise. So we brought some local people together in a kind of meeting. We go there every so often and try to meet these people and listen to their own stories about what happened in Spa, because of course there's also appropriation of land. There's also tension in how, for instance, at a certain point, the tap water in Spa is no longer water from Spa, but comes from 25 miles beyond. Of course, the infrastructure for that is paid with public money in order for the company to enlarge its assets. So all of these things, again, are really interesting to understand from an economical, theoretical, and legal perspective. What was also interesting is that although there was a big threshold for people to participate in our walks because we were the conceptual contemporary artists that everybody's afraid of, and that people think I'm not going because we will not understand. There's a big threshold. In the last weekend, there were 35 people that showed up to walk with us, local people also. And that was really for us a big relief that we managed to mobilize, let's say 20, 25 local people that really came more than once. And now we set up this group of people that we want to meet again, and they have their own stories. Very local stories, family related stories. So that's where we are at with this project. So yeah. Still lots to be done.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you both very much for the conversation. And I'm wondering if we should open for any questions, if any of our guests have any questions to Kathleen and Ronnie.
Maybe I can start while people are putting their thoughts together. I'm curious about what happened with the Pump House Gallery when you couldn't continue the work because you didn't really get into details with that. And I mean, just to say, it's really that formulation that you made that, it's, they ask you to do the critique, and then when you actually do the critique, then it's a different story. Well, it's kind of hopeful to see there's an avenue for that still left within the art world, since critique has become such a currency. It's actually lost that stakes that it used to have. So it's like, I wonder if you have any thoughts on what kind of critique this is that still has that kind of traction that would make the institution stop the work. And yeah, the story of how it happened.
It's far more extreme than you would expect, because we're actually the last show of the Pump House Gallery. They shut down. It's not because of us, I guess, and it was already simmering, probably, we don't really know. But the show could go on without problems, more or less, because the curator was very, let's say, careful in his communication. But when we did the symposium and we wanted to make a publication, one of the people that we had invited as a speaker, she had written a PhD on the area as an urban geographer. So she was in full detail, and we asked her to write an essay of about 5,000 words, short essay. And then, of course, because it was published and because they had some extra funding to print it, the curator handed in the text to management, and then they read this article. and
then all hell broke loose.
Yeah, there was a bit of a panic in the sense that, and we understand it's not a black and white story, because Enable is a charity that's funded by the local council, Wandsworth, and the name Wandsworth fell too often in that essay, because Wandsworth is the council that gave all the building permits. And that actually,
they're also implicated in the story I was telling, that the value capture finance, so that all the value is guaranteed for the investors, and if something goes wrong, it's just the public basically that have to pay for the gaps that fall in this. If it doesn't work, it's the taxpayer that has to pay up.
Yeah. And we could understand when it's about costs, but when it's about profit margins, then I really go, it's not possible, right? And so in the end, they said, well, you can't publish it. And we said, why not? Well, isn't this you have to take out? And it was all paragraphs. And then we said, we can't do this because this lady has done some serious research for 6 years on you guys, and we're not going to censor the text. And then they said, well, then you have to take out our logos. And I said, well, much obliged, you're welcome. So we put in black squares for their logos and printed the book anyway. So the curator left by that time. He had another job. And when our show was over, they closed down the gallery because they were fed up with all of these artists making their lives hard. And I'm not really a big fan of critique, in the sense critique. Because of course the dynamics of capitalism come from critique in a way, and that's why I think the critique that we try to bring, I would rather say that it's kind of more I don't know. It's that's why I think the humor is so important. When you say critique, it's usually not very funny. And I think I like to think our work is a bit funny.
They also didn't like the title, A Modest Proposal.
Yeah, that was another. So that's maybe a hint to what we think about the work. It's a reference to an essay of Jonathan Swift with an outrageous idea to stop famine in Ireland. But management immediately took as a class problem. And of course, the board of the charity is packed with lawyers and people from finance. And yeah, it didn't fall well. So we went to London actually the second week that the project was on and negotiated to keep. But it was a kind of wake-up call to really say, okay, we're not going to have an easy ride here. And, but it was interesting because we see it as a challenge then to still make it happen and keep them on board as long as possible. But with the censorship of the text, we could not accept that. It was impossible. Anyway, it's not that we are heroic or something. It's really very stressful. So we're super nervous about all this shit. So anyway.
Thank you.
Wondering if anybody else has any questions. No.
Super clear. Well, we'll take investments then.
I mean, just one more thing. I mean, I was thinking about with humor as this relationship between speculation and realism that Bassam was asking about. Yeah, I mean, there are all these like different affects or emotions that are between like that abstraction and this materialism. Humor is one of them, but I was also thinking of the uncanniness of the video when you're, you know, setting up this business meeting and all these weird actions and backgrounds shifting in the back. Yeah, I was thinking of uncanny as another effect, which is also kind of related to humor. And yeah, the German translation of uncanny, like Mark Fisher talks about this, that uncanny is not a good translation from unheimlich, which is actually unhomely. Yeah, so it's like there's something unhomely in your home.
It's like Home Alone. But there's what we also like is failure. So if you see the
whole film is a failure.
No, it's not a failure in that sense.
It was not an intention to make the film.
True.
But then, of course, it's a huge effort to then
still make a film without a proper budget. Anyway, what I really enjoy the financial model is like an animation, but I think it's the worst animation that you could make. It's very close to an NFT actually. It's like, and those kind of things are really so contradictory in a way, and that's also what we kind of like to do, to subvert our own positions actually. And in that sense, we're very serious about that part, you know, to be not so serious and actually come up with imaginary forms and at the same time deconstruct them while you're doing them. So most people have a hard time figuring out where are you guys at actually? What's your position? But I don't think that making art is about what's your position. It's not at all, I think. It's about exactly the opposite. And when we do the operational realism thing, well, we'll talk about that, then you know our position. But that's really, they're related, of course, but I think the work itself should have this ambiguity, should have this, you can call it unheimlich, should have this, you don't really know what to do with it. Is it black? Is it white? It's somewhere in between, and it's not clear, and it shifts. And that's why I think it's worth
Mm.
making. Otherwise, it's
Some
just
people see it as a critical stance, and other people take it very literal.
yeah.
Because when we were in London, there was this investment guy who was really stalking us, trying to set up the modest proposal for real. So yeah, in a way that was like a
fan. It
yeah,
was a fan.
it's like a fan. Like
Biggest
okay, there is some reality to the proposal, and it
He told us.
might be made in reality. So
It-
that was cool.
it
But
told-
on the other hand, it was a bit unheimlich also that he was really stalking us too. And then also the lawyer, yeah, if the artists don't want to make this proposal, then maybe you want to make this proposal together with me.
He told us the only thing that's wrong with it is that I didn't think of this.
It's good material for a modest proposal sequel
Yeah, exactly.
following him.
We'll be working on that. Yeah. Still have 2 chapters to go.
Mm.
They were actually scheduled, but both were cancelled because of different reasons. But there's still 2 chapters that we want to work on.
Mm.
Hopefully in the future.
Mhm.
Let's see.
Well, seems like if there's no questions, we can finish the meeting. Thank you so much. This was really, really generous and
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, you're very welcome. I hope you enjoyed it. And we'll send you a link to the index. And if you want, you can share that. I don't have it on
yes,
my
please.
computer. I have to check in my other computer and I can send you that link later. Okay?
Thank you so much.
Okay. You're welcome.
Hey, thank
Have a good
you.
evening.
Take care.
Talk
Take
soon.
care.